Hello there. Y'all not gonna like this one. Let's talk about the Native Americans. In 2007, the Cherokee Nation disenrolled 2,800 freedmen black people from their tribe when federal funding was involved so they'd get more money. And it violated the treaty that they had with the freedmen black people. The court ruled in favor of the freedmen black people. 1979, the Creek Nation decided to disenroll the black freedmen from their tribe. The Seminole Nation tried to enforce different rules for the black ones. The Chicmacha tribe of Louisiana, between 1904 and 1919, they disenrolled African and Native descent people. To this day, the descendants of those people are not allowed to enroll in the Creek Nation. The Mattapony tribe in Virginia disenrolled their black, if they looked phenotypically black, members out, or if they married black. The Pamunkey tribe, they disenrolled people if they married black people. The Rappahannock tribe, they will not, they disenroll members who look African American. There's more. They did this because they get more money individually and their casino profits and all of that if they disenroll the black people. They also say they don't believe in blood quantum, yet a lot of these tribes make you prove that you have a lot of Native American ancestry. And that one woman who I went back and forth with is a great example of that. My great times through grandmother was Native American, and she told me, because I had no connection, didn't know what tribe, because I was adopted by my brother's dad, didn't know anything about it, that I wasn't allowed to be in tribe. I thought blood quantum didn't matter. I wasn't asking to be anyway. And on the trail of fucking tears, the Cherokee had their enslaved black people that they enslaved with them, which is crazy work to me. Crying while you have slaves. And on those pictures, they never show the black enslaved people. That was really heartbreaking to hear.
What the hell is going on with my timeline? Recently, I just started seeing a bunch of Aboriginal Americans talking about their indigenous ancestry on my For You page, which I'm happy with, by the way, because before the TikTok ban, it was not showing me that. But tonight, I'm seeing a bunch of Black Americans pop up on my For You page talking crap about Aboriginal Americans being indigenous to the Americas and just trying to like downplay everything that they be talking about. And I think that's crazy considering how the people that you call yourself defending, the natives, don't give a fuck about you. The natives do not give a fuck about Black Americans. They don't give a fuck about Aboriginal Americans. They don't give a fuck about Black Americans. They don't give a fuck about Africans. They don't give a fuck. If you are not white or white adjacent, they don't give a fuck about you. Okay, and the thing is, most natives are mixed white people. They are heavily mixed with white. And y'all are on here defending these people. Why? I think the reality is that a lot of you crave proximity to whiteness and y'all don't want to call things out when you know some BS is happening right in front of your eyes, because it would jeopardize you being in proximity to whiteness. And a lot of natives know that they are mixed white people. That's why they get mad when you call them white Indian, because they know that they're white pretending to be Indian. And this is the issue. A lot of y'all Black Americans think that by dick riding the natives that you're going to be cool with them, and you're not. Like, look how they treat freedmen people. Look at how they treat Afro-Indigenous people. Just look at how they treat darker skinned Indigenous people. They literally whitewash the photos of darker skinned Aboriginal Americans. Okay? And y'all really think that they care about solidarity with Black Americans when they are profiting and benefiting off of Black Americans not accepting or identifying with their indigenous heritage. Black Americans are being played, and y'all are willing to be played with and think that you are doing the world a favor when you go against Aboriginal Americans, when we are the ones that are telling you how to research your ancestry and reclaim your identity. But a lot of you guys' rebuttal to that is, well, you think you indigenous, but wait till the cops pull you over. Like we're not already aware that we live in a colonized society run by envelopians, the envelope people. We very much know how the envelope people are and act. I mean, hello. We have been talking about ID alchemy for decades now. We are very aware of how the Mayo creatures think of us and think who we are. Okay? But the thing is, what y'all fail to realize is that the envelopians do know who we are. They probably just won't say it out loud, or they just don't want to accept it. But that's not our problem. The issue is that many Black Americans want people to accept them, and they want people to accept them in a colonized ideology that was forced upon them. If you identify as Black American, you are accepting a social construct that was forced onto you and your ancestors. But you want to come to other people and tell them they are wrong for not submitting to a colonized ideology of themselves and their ancestors. That's insanity, boo-boo. And that is not our problem.
Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, Africans. It's Africa, beautiful landscape. Yes. So there's been a long debate about the foundational Black Americans and the indigenous Black America and the indigenous Americans. Some people argue that it is the Black people who are the indigenous of America, but not the Red Indians, as they were called by Christopher Columbus. I myself, I personally believe that the Red Indians were, or rather, that is what we were taught, that they were the original inhabitants. However, we've had some research, we've had some news and documentaries showing us that the west coast of Africa was already interacting with the east coast of the Americas, both the North America and the South America. We've had evidence of transactions. We've had evidence of exchange of technology, exchange of agricultural techniques, yes, between the West African coast and the east coast of the North and Southern America. So a Black American man came forth, and he's trying to debunk, he's trying to achieve a not so much of a nominal cultural narrative. He's trying to tell us something that is not known to many. I myself, I find it excessively intriguing, right? So I want us to listen to him, get to understand who are these indigenous, who are the indigenous people of the Americas. I shall get back by the end of the video, where we shall also have a deeper critical analysis. Let's dive in.
Salam and afakia, peace and love. The name of this book is Indivisible: African Native American Lives in the Americas. I'm going to read from the section called DNA and Native American Identity, written by Kimberly Tallbear and it was written in 2009. Since the early 1960s, genetic techniques have been applied to traditional anthropological questions, including those concerning ancient human migrations and the biological and cultural relationships between human populations. By drawing blood from people around the world, geneticists and anthropologists investigate the origin of and genetic relationships between geographically disparate populations. Native American Amerindian peoples are heavily studied, and in their genomes, researchers search for molecular sequences or genetic signatures of the first peoples of the Americas. In the last decade, these types of molecular sequences, also called ancestry DNA, have become salient beyond the lab and now feed a commercial phenomenon. Since 2000, nearly 500,000 people have purchased genetic ancestry tests, and public interest continues to grow. So-called Native American DNA markers are now detectable through self-administered cheek swab tests marketed by more than a dozen companies. In the U.S., those interested in Native American genetic ancestry include genealogists, applicants to Ivy League and other competitive schools, and former citizens of Native American tribes such as Seminole Freedmen descendants, whose ejection is usually related, at least in part, to the financial stakes of membership. While no tribes or First Nations currently use DNA fingerprint tests to confer citizenships, these tests are reconfiguring concepts of Native American race and identity in the 21st century. In narrow circumstances, some genetic ancestry tests are highly reliable, but they examine only about 1% of the user's DNA. These tests fall into two categories: mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA, passed from mother and the mother's mother, and so on, and Y chromosome tests, which reveal the DNA passed from the father and the father's father, so on. The results of these tests, while helpful to genealogists seeking verifiable biological links between specific individuals or information about the deep geographical history of a genetic line, are limited to strict matrilineal or patrilineal progressions and do not adequately account for gene flow between populations or the high genetic variation present between human populations. A third type of these tests to account for overall ancestry by surveying for the 175 autosomal markers inherited from both parents from across all 23 chromosome pairs. Each marker occurs in higher and lower frequencies in different groups around different parts of the world. Surveying for markers inherited from all of one's ancestors is an important selling point in a highly racialized society such as the U.S. After analyzing markers in the test taker's genome, a complicated algorithm compares the result to the frequencies of these markers in populations including Indo-European, East Asian, Native American, and Sub-Saharan African, and reveals what percentages of these ancestries they possess. This highlights a big problem or set of problems with genetic ancestry tests. Despite disclaimers, they suggest a linear, deterministic link between genetics and race that simply does not exist. Genetic ancestry tests involve assumptions of uncomplicated social continuity between present-day ethnic, national, racial groups and groups in the past, even if those groups are genetically related. Genetic sequences named according to today's salient racial or ethnic categories correspond to ideas of continental origins. Companies purport to tell consumers where in the world their genetic ancestors originated, and in which races or cultural and social groups they belong to, with the implication that the test takers themselves originated in those places and can claim affiliation with those groups or tribes. Genetic markers come to stand for the individual and the race, group, or tribe. Patterns of residence today, however, are rarely synonymous with patterns of the past. Human beings move around. Social groups organize themselves and are organized and name themselves and are named in different ways from era to era. Genetic bases built from living human beings, biological samples offer interesting but incomplete genetic views of the deep past, and certainly should not be seen as anything approximating a cultural or social snapshot. DNA tests, aside from their use in very specific cases, compel us to conflate genetic ancestry with racial, ethnic, national, tribal, and kinship identity categories. But these categories are embedded in one another and all have been shaped by colonialism. The 21st century use of genetic markers to weigh in heavily on these categories is a practice not disentangled from colonialisms, which dates from the 16th century. The genetic knowledge that enables us to do this is our intellectual and emotional receptiveness to doing it, are predicated on the power relations of the colonial history. At least 2 companies have marketed the DNA fingerprint or parentage test directly to U.S. tribes and Canadian First Nations for purposes of enrollment. Commonly sold as a paternity test, it is both more and less informative than genetic ancestry tests because it gauges relatedness at a different biological level with a very high degree of probability. DNA fingerprints are often used in conjunction with blood requirements and are currently employed by many tribes on a case-by-case basis. The parentage test can help fill gaps in the documentary record, for example, when proof of biological paternity is needed to a certain blood quantum and process a child's enrollment and application. This situation possesses fewer risks to tribal sovereignty, both political and cultural. Another option that accounts for some tribes' traditional kinship values is found in the Sesitan Wepatan Oyate SWO, for example. It uses affidavits from enrolled relatives who testify about their respective relationships with an enrollment applicant whose biological parentage was in question. SWO reviews both DNA fingerprints and affidavits, thus preventing genetic evidence to trump familial testimony about kinship. Much more risky to the historical and political foundations of contemporary tribal governance is the shift by some U.S. tribes and Canadian First Nations, especially those that distribute financial benefits from gaming and other economic windfalls to members in the form of per capita payments across the membership DNA fingerprint testing. The research and documentation of biological relationships are time-consuming for applicants and cumbersome for tribal enrollment offices. But it is not only the missing or hard-to-track records that pose problems in tribal enrollment. Critics of blood rules, including would-be tribal members, talk about inaccuracies and discrimination in the tribal-based roles constructed many years ago. If ancestors were left off the rolls because they were absent from the reservation during their construction or wrongly judged to be racially other than Native American, the DNA fingerprint test cannot rectify that documentary problem. Speaking in support of using DNA fingerprint tests for purposes of enrollment, a representative from one company says DNA fingerprints ensure that there is no possibility of incorporating a subjective decision into whether someone becomes a member or not, but whether or not someone is verifiably a biological kin of the type indicated by a parentage test is not objective enrollment criterion. Allowing a parentage test to trump other means of reckoning kin, blood quantum, as a way of counting relatives or signed affidavits or family relatedness for purposes of enrollment gives propriety to technoscience knowledge of certain kinship relations over other types of knowledge and relationships. Across the board, testing does not solve every problem related to establishing membership. Moreover, it often creates new problems for existing families, considering the not uncommon situation in which false biological parentage is exposed even when it was not questioned in the first place. It's been said that we are a nation governed by science. Genetic studies carry tremendous cultural weight and seem far more precise and scientifically valid than the old-fashioned ideas of blood quantum still common in tribal enrollment. DNA testing and gene metaphors are now expanding into territory long claimed by blood and blood metaphors. Yet important material differences between blood and genes differentiate the symbolic work that they do in relation to Native American identities. Those differences, in addition to the scientific authority of genetics, make it difficult to see why the science is actually more problematic than blood at this historic juncture. Native American tribes have shown that they are deeply attached to kinship. Much of it is biological in determining citizenship. Exceptions to biologically based tribal citizenship include the Seminole and Cherokee Freedmen, descendants of freed slaves and not necessarily blood relations of the tribe, who have long been eligible for tribal enrollment owing to post-Civil War treaty provisions. Nonetheless, Freedmen descendants continue to struggle against blood rules, and their tribal citizenship has recently been put at risk or revoked. Critics of blood quantum recognize the difficulties in completely overcoming biological bases for Native American identity. Even among those who advocate concepts of tribal citizenship that ultimately extend beyond biology, residency, cultural requirements, adoption, and other allowances for naturalization, many also argue for more inclusive blood rules, especially for lineal descent. By standard tribal lineal descent regulations, an applicant need only document his or her biological descent from one individual named on the tribe's base rolls. In a very few tribes, that an ancestor must be strictly maternal or paternal, but descent can usually occur in either line. Often portrayed as less essentialist because it is more inclusive than blood quantum, lineal descent can also be seen as more essentialist than blood quantum because it traces identity through a single line, basically following the same kinship concept underlying genetic ancestry testing. Genetic ancestry tests gauge linear biological descent along strictly maternal and paternal lines or bloodlines in the language of blood, a method or reckoning that is valid in some contexts but culturally narrow. This type of multi-generational lineal blood relationship tends to dominate thinking about family in the U.S., but it can be at odds with the concept of the tribe. By privileging such narrow, often distant links to unnameable ancestors whose cultural and political ties are impossible to establish, genetic ancestry tests ironically undermine the sovereignty and self-governance of today's tribes and First Nations. Blood quantum stands for the problematic social link between an individual and a land-based group, meaning the higher the blood quantum, the greater the likelihood a person has relatives that are Native American or from a specific tribe, and the greater the probability of actual group affiliation. In short, blood quantum attempts to capture a network set of social and cultural relations based on biological relatedness. Again, the DNA fingerprint, unlike genetic ancestry tracing, is intelligible in the context of tribal blood rules and confirms genetic connections between closely related and named individuals. Clearly, there are problems with blood quantum, but ideas other than biological essentialism than that go to the heart of what is unique about the tribe, also ground in its use. Blood is unlikely to be redeemed. However, even as a placeholder until a time when it is not the only way to citizenship, but rather one among multiple ways when tribes and First Nations enjoy the economic, political, and cultural power to truly make enrollment as citizenship. In the meantime, genetic testing companies assertively seek out not only private individuals seeking for Native American ancestry, but also tribal and First Nation governments hoping to precisely and objectively construct their tribal membership. To be Native American is to be simultaneously categorized according to racial, ethnic, and sometimes citizenship terms. DNA is reconfiguring those categories, and as we consider involvement with genetic testing, we must think carefully about the implications of our understandings of what it is to be Native American. Do we want it to be a genetic category after all? What then are the implications for the tribes and the First Nations as complex governing and kinship entities? What are the risks to the historical and political foundations upon which a contemporary tribal governance and land rights are based? We have much at stake. Name of that chapter is DNA and Native American Identity by Kimberly Tolbear. I hope a few people learned something from it. Salam and Afakir. Peace and love. The name of the book is Indivisible.
Well, so the TikTok girls want to know, what's your ethnicity?
A Southern lady from New Orleans.
Are you like mixed with anything?
Oh, just like a pot of gumbo. Got a little bit of everything.
What's your hair regimen?
Wash it.
Mm-hmm.
Condition it.
Mm-hmm.
Braid it.
Okay.
And let it dry. Sometimes I don't even comb it for a couple of days. Well, you know that's the truth, you know?
I know.
You know, I'm not a hair person. I usually put it in a ponytail, or when and I wear it braided a lot. But I try not to put any chemicals or any heat or anything like this on my hair.
Okay.
You know.
And what hair products do you use?
Shimmering Lights.
Shimmering Lights, yeah.
Mm-hmm. The shampoo and the conditioner. And I also use Forbidden Fruits that my granddaughter have made for me. It's so hot here in Texas. And it's summertime. And to wear it down is very hot. So I usually just put it in a ponytail, or I put these two braids like this. After I wash my hair, this is what I do. And then I pin it like this here. And I let it dry. takes about 2 days to dry, you know. But that's all I do. I guess it must be in the genes. I am just so surprised that Jasmine took that video of me, and she said she was going to put it on TikTok. I said, okay, you can put it on TikTok if you want to, you know. And then she started saying all of the views that I had. And I said, oh, my God, are you serious? And she said, yeah. And I said, oh, God, I didn't think so. Thank you so much. You got me loving my gray hair even more.
After listening to the man, after gathering what he has said, it is true and it is evidenced that we might have been told lies. We might have been told what was not true, right? The truth remains that the transatlantic slave trade did take place, even though we might have had black people as the indigenous people of the Americas. Because black people are also found in Australia, the aboriginals of Australia. We also have the black people of the Pacific Islands. We find them all over there, right? We also have some black people of Southern America, some black people in India, Southern India, so many dark-skinned people. So it is always said that the original, the first human beings were black, right? They were the color of the soil. So that would tell you, and that would be enough evidence that indeed we came from the soil, and even before the Red Indians, maybe through climatic changes, even through geological changes and genetic adaptation, we were first black. So maybe what was captured was when we were still black. I'm not saying that black people evolved to be Red Indians. What I'm saying is that we've had a lot of evidence that black people have been. Black people have always been in many parts of the world other than Africa. It's not, black people are not only originating from Africa. We've had other people in continents very far from Africa. Some in Madagascar, some in the Pacific Islands, some all the way in Australia, some all the way in southern India. How did they get there? You've also seen those documentaries that are showing you about the black Chinese, the black Koreans, and the black Japanese. How did this come to happen? It still points out to the original idea I told you. The first human beings were black. So from the blackness, people changed over time to become what we see them today. Yes, that is my thought, guys. Share your thoughts. I'd really love to hear from you. And then let's further this discussion. This is EFK Original Documentaries. If you like what I do, surely subscribe. See you in the next one.